I watched Mandy undress and marveled at the fact that I had managed to get a woman like her. When I met her 10 years ago, she was 50 kilos and had not gained a kilo. I never got tired of looking at her. She smiled, looking at me, and said, "I see you still like what you see." She knelt down in front of me, satisfied me, and then pulled me onto the bed. I never managed to get a nap, and in fact, I was almost late for work. Work that evening was pure hell. All I thought about were mini cameras, tapping our phone, and the receiver in the attic. What did it all mean? I wondered what I would find when I returned home. The receiver in the attic could only be checked when I was not at home, and during the holidays I was nearby all the time, except when I was at work. This meant that it could only be checked after 10:45 when I left for work, and before I returned home at 8. This meant that unless someone snuck into the house after Mandy left for work and before I got home, the inspector had to be Mandy, or someone Mandy let in after I left. Hal's theory was that if I was being followed, they would check the receiver almost every day. The first thing I did when I returned home was go up to the attic. The mini camera Hal installed was connected to a compact video recorder that he hid under the attic insulation. I pulled the cassette out, inserted a new one, and then went down to the basement. My workshop was monitored by a spy camera, but the rest of the basement was empty, so Hal installed a small TV, VCR, and audio cassette player behind the Christmas decorations. I inserted the tape into the VCR and pressed play. It was dark for about 2 seconds, and then the screen showed an image of a hatch to the attic, which was raised and pushed to the side. The timestamp indicated 10:58 p.m., which was just some time after I left for work. Then Mandy's head appeared in the hatch. Until then, even though I knew it was highly unlikely, I hoped that whatever happened, Mandy wasn't involved, but she was there. I watched as she walked over to the receiving device and pressed the buttons. She watched and listened to what was recorded on the answering machine for about 10 minutes and then left the attic. I checked the phone wiretapping that Hal installed. It was a voice-activated cassette recorder, and the meter read 217, so I pulled out the tape, put a new one in, and reset the meter. I used headphones in case the spy camera in my workshop was sensitive enough to pick up other sounds in the basement. So I put them on and rewound the tape, then pressed play. A male voice said, "Yes? Good morning." "Good morning to you. Is everything okay on your end?" "Everything seems normal. Nothing unusual." "This is good. We don't need any complications. Do you know the plan for the day?" "Certainly. Just checking. It never hurts to check." "Everything will be done. He reminded me last night, so I need to make sure you don't forget. His shift ends in 2 weeks, and he will work afternoons for 4 months. This will certainly be a big help, and it can't come soon enough. Have you figured out how you're going to get around this when he has a day shift?" "No, not yet, but I'm sure we'll come up with something workable. Call me this afternoon." "It won't be until after 4. Doesn't matter. Just be sure to call me and let me know how it went. Goodbye." Bye. I sat there, staring at the tape recorder, thinking, what the hell is going on? "What are you doing, Mandy?" Hal wasn't surprised when I told him it was Mandy who checked the radio in the attic. Unlike me, he didn't deny it and knew from the very beginning who it had to be. He listened to the telephone conversation and shook his head. "I already said this, Rob, but it sounds bad. At least she's doing something they don't want you to know about, and it must be some hard shit if they spend over $30,000 just to keep an eye on you. I think you need professional help with this matter." "You already said this once." "What do you mean by professional help?" "I mean, you need a private investigator to figure out what Mandy is up to." "I can't afford the kind of money it would take to do something like that." "This is not necessarily true. You might be able to do this without money." "How?" "The guy I'm thinking about has a private jet. I think he said it was a bonanza for Beechcraft. Maybe you could work on his plane in exchange for him looking after Mandy. He doesn't really need the money anyway. Being a private detective is more like a hobby for him." "Hobbies?" "Yes. He used to be a stockbroker or some other financial genius, and he either made or got a ton of money. And then he retired and opened a detective agency because he always had a dream of being a private detective. It turns out he had a flair for it and was successful at it. But if I were you, I'd wait 2 weeks. Why? Because you will be free at night and in the afternoon. Right now, whatever she does has to be done during the day while she is at work or should be at work. When you are on the swing, she will have both evenings and days to work. This will give Glenn a better chance of quickly figuring out what's going on. I don't know if I can hold out that long. Only you can judge this. I'll call Glenn today and ask him if he'd be willing to make a deal with you. Today, I'm going to buy one of those prepaid cell phones and not tell Mandy about it. I'll call you on this number when I get it. I don't want to use my regular cell phone. As high-tech as all these things they use are, I don't want to risk my cell phone being tapped. Good idea. I had to think about it myself. I called Hal at 4 and gave him a prepaid phone number, and he told me that he called a private investigator friend of his, and that the friend was interested in making a deal, and he gave me the man's name and phone number. I called Glenn Hawthorne as soon as I disconnected from Hal and arranged to meet him the next morning at 11. That evening, I pretended everything was fine, and as far as I could tell, Mandy accepted it. The next day, when I got home from work, I didn't bother checking the camera in the attic since it had already shown me what I needed to find out, who was checking the remote receiver, and I immediately started tapping the phone. Good morning? Good morning. Everything is fine? He's been a little out of sorts lately, but that's not uncommon. He usually gets like this towards the end of his hard shift. Did you receive a message yesterday afternoon? About the fact that you were canceled? Yes, I heard. Friday is still ahead, so contact me tomorrow. Goodbye. Bye. At 11, I walked into the Hawthorne Investigative Agency office and met with Glenn Hawthorne, the owner and only employee. He already knew some of the story from Hal, and I gave him the phone tap tapes. He listened to me and raised an eyebrow. They don't tell you anything that you can use, but they tell you a lot because they let you know that something very sneaky is going on. So, what do you want? I just want to know what the hell is going on. We made a deal. He'll do his research, and I'll do 100-hour and yearly inspections of his Beechcraft until I've worked off his fee. In addition to the inspections, I would do all the maintenance, but he would have to pay for the parts. I gave him all the information about Mandy, her schedule, and where she worked, her cell number, and information about the car she drove. I told him about Hal's idea to wait until I started working another shift, and he agreed that it was a good idea. However, he really wanted to do one thing as soon as possible. He wanted to install a spy camera in my kitchen. That's where most people's lives end. They sit, talk, drink coffee or another drink, and between them there is a flat surface on which to write or draw. I arranged for him to do it the next day. I wasn't at all surprised when Hal showed up the next day to set up a spy camera in the kitchen. He told me he did all the electronic surveillance. I played him on that morning's tape. It was basically the same as the previous 2 days. Good morning, and everything is fine on your end, as well as information that nothing was planned for that day. Mandy brought home some work that evening, so I went down to my basement workshop and worked on a bookcase I was making. In a way, it was a relief because I didn't have to face her. If I hadn't looked at her face, she wouldn't have noticed that anything was bothering me. The last thing I needed at that moment was to make her worry and think that she needed to be even more careful about what she was doing. On Friday morning, the man on the other end of the line said, "Have a nice weekend," which told me that whatever Mandy was doing, it only applied to Monday and Friday. Trying to understand what was happening was driving me crazy. Mandy's behavior towards me was the same as it has been since we started dating. She was loving, affectionate, and our love life was wonderful. We haven't quarreled for many years. I couldn't notice anything wrong in our relationship. What the hell could she be doing that she and whoever she was doing it with had to be so afraid to let me find out? Well, maybe I'll start getting some answers on Monday when I start working this afternoon and Glenn starts working on the problem. I think I managed to get through the weekend without alerting Mandy that all was not well. She didn't get calls in the morning because for the next 4 months, I would be coming home in the morning. She would either have to talk to this man on the phone in her office, on her cell phone, or after I left for work. I made a mental note to ask Hal if we could put a voice-activated recorder in her car. like the one she put in mine. On Tuesday morning, after Mandy left for work, I reviewed the audio and video recordings from Monday. There was nothing interesting in the video, but there was something in the audio recording. Hello, just checking. Is this still valid for tomorrow evening? As of 2 hours ago, I don't really expect this to be canceled. Are you sure everything is okay on your end? There shouldn't be any problems. It would be better if there were no problems. We don't pay you to have problems. And you won't have them, Mandy barked at him. They said goodbye, hung up, and left me to think about something else. Did Mandy get paid? Did this have anything to do with her job? On Wednesday morning, at 8:13, my marriage ended. It turns out we didn't need Glenn to find out what Mandy was up to. Only what Hal planted in the house did the trick. Once Mandy left for work and I had breakfast, I went to check the audio and video recordings from Tuesday. Video from the attic showed Mandy loading the receiver into what appeared to be a portable CD player. The camera in the living room captured Mandy walking into the room with a man I didn't know, and they walked over and sat down on the couch. The man hugged Mandy and kissed her, and then asked how long he had. She told him he needed to leave by 11, and he said he didn't think he would have enough time. She giggled and said, "You mean you still have something left after spending 4 hours in your hotel room? I can never get enough of you, and you know it. I just don't understand why you insist on making love to me here, in my house and on my bed. Of course you understand, Mandy. You are mine, and the best way to prove it is to see you here, in your home, on your bed, on your kitchen counter, on your washer and dryer, anywhere. Perhaps my husband just has something to say about who I belong to. To hell with him. If he were strong enough to hold you, I wouldn't be here. Would you like something to drink? Why am I trying to prepare you? Scotch tape, if you have it. Of course I have it, honey. I knew you'd be here, so I made sure I had your brand of tape on hand. Did you know that I would be here? Of course I knew it, my love. I know what kind of person you are, and I knew that sooner or later you would want me here. And I don't need this "I want you in your own bed" nonsense. You want me in my husband's house and in my husband's bed. You want to leave your scent in his house, take his wife on his own territory, and don't even try to deny it. Make yourself comfortable while I get you some scotch. Mandy left the room, and the man stood up, removed his pants and underpants, and then sat back down. Mandy handed him his drink. After, he said, "We need to go to the bedroom, baby." "Your desire is law for me, my love." Mandy stood up and headed to the bedroom. By then I had tears in my eyes. I loved this woman. Mandy was my life from the day I first met her, and in all the years that followed, I thought she felt the same way about me. Your wish is my law? I was crushed. I forced myself to watch what was happening in the bedroom. I would need some steel in my spine for what was to come, and the more I watched her betray me, the harder that steel became. I heard her tell him that he had to leave. But why? He will be free only at 11:30 and will return home only after 12. We have time. No, we won't do that. I need to take these sheets off the bed and put on clean ones, and then I need to take a shower before he gets home. Don't take a shower. Oh, sure. And what will I tell him? Just tell him you're hot and wet because you got horny waiting for him to come home. Do you really want me to do this? Undoubtedly. She was silent for a moment and then said, "Okay, but if things go badly, you might have to support me when he kicks me out." You will do this? Anything for you, my love? You know it. If he understands and splits, you know about my unchanged offer. I will put you up in your own apartment. That's sweet, love, but you really need to go. But be prepared for me to call if he doesn't like how he feels. I thought back to the previous night. Mandy greeted me when I walked through the door. She was wearing a black lace nightgown, high heels, and fresh makeup. I need you, baby. I'm horny as a goat and I need you. Come on, baby, quickly get into bed. She was no different from the other times I had made love to her, but without knowing how long she'd sex with me, I had no way of knowing that I wasn't the second man of the day every time we got into bed together. I remembered her comment about 4 hours in your hotel room, and I wondered how many times a week she met someone in a hotel room when she was supposed to be working. This gave me another idea. She was supposed to be at work, So how did she get out of this? Did her boss know what she was doing? Was he somehow involved in this? All things I would have to ask Glenn to find out. After watching the video, I listened to the phone conversation. Hello? He left. Everything went well? He still wants to make me his mistress. It's a shame that we can't do this. This would certainly improve the situation. Well, that can't happen, and if you know what's good for you, you'll make sure it doesn't happen. I don't think I like the tone of your voice. Cool shit. I know you, and it would be like you to let my husband find out so he could kick me out and I would be free to be Sam's mistress. I would never do anything like that. Yes, you would. And the only thing stopping you is the sure knowledge that I would snitch on you and every one of the half-dozen or so men you made me care about. You destroy my marriage, and I will destroy yours, and don't forget about it. I won't forget this. See you tomorrow evening. And he hung up. Now I had even more to think about. It sounded like Mandy was doing what she was doing in protest, but that didn't mean anything to me. The fact is that she did it, and that's all that mattered to me. The man she had cared for the previous evening was bad enough, but, in her own words, there were also half a dozen or so others. How long did this last, and why didn't I know anything about it? I called Glenn, brought him up to date, and told him to focus on the man Mandy had spent the day with. He already knew about this man, as he had been working on Mandy since I started working the shift. He told me that the man, Samuel Billings, according to the hotel register, invited Mandy to dinner, and then returned to his hotel room for a little over 4 hours, and then followed them to my house. I told him that Mandy was going to meet the man who was behind it all that night, and I told him that I wanted everything about Samuel Billings that he could get me. I intended to find out who the half-dozen or so were who were making Mandy do what she did, and then I was going to destroy them all. Mandy was waiting for me again when I got home that evening. We had sex twice before she snuggled up to me and fell asleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the last couple of years. As far as I could see, there was no change in Mandy's attitude towards me. She was gentle and loving, or an excellent actress, and our sex life was as good as ever. There is no way in hell I could point to something and say, "Here! Right here!" That's when what she does began. When I finally fell asleep, my head was full of questions to which I had no answers. I waited an hour after Mandy left for work before checking the audio and video recording. I gave her an hour in case she forgot something and came back for it. There was nothing on the phone recording, and the only video was from the camera Glenn suggested we install in the kitchen and the camera in our bedroom. Mandy and a man walked into the kitchen, and Mandy asked the man if he wanted anything to drink, and he said beer would be nice if she had some. She got him a beer and herself a Diet Coke, and then sat down with him at the table. "You have it?" he asked. She took something that looked like a CD from her pocket and slid it across the table towards him. He opened his briefcase, took out an envelope, and pushed it towards her. She pushed it aside, leaned forward, and said, "So what now?" "He will stay in the city until Saturday. He has dinner planned tonight, but he wants to see you the rest of the evenings while he's here." "This won't happen. Rob's days off while he's on shift are Friday and Saturday, so those 2 evenings are free. Couldn't you have a bachelorette party with your friends or pretend you're going to an Avon party?" "I could, but I won't. I'm not going to give up my time with Rob. It's only for this weekend. Everything else will go to your husband." "No, John, I won't do that. So leave everything as it is. It was a conversation that I couldn't make sense of. She's cheating on me but won't give up our time together. It didn't make any sense." He shrugged and stood up, and Mandy walked him to the door. After he left the bedroom, the camera showed Mandy reaching into her closet with the envelope she was given and leaving without it. So, on my list of things to do as soon as I finished watching the audio and video was to look into Mandy's closet. The closet in our bedroom is actually 2 closets. It runs the entire length of the long side of our 5x 7-meter bedroom. Inside, at the midpoint, there is a wall that divides the cabinet into equal halves. One side is my dressing room, and the other is Mandy's. I don't actually have a need or reason to go into Mandy's half, and in fact, I couldn't remember the last time I was there. I started my search just outside the door, and headed towards the back door. I didn't find anything until I got to the very end. There were a dozen shoe and hat boxes and 3 medium-sized rolling drawers with Mom's Things written on the sides in magic marker. Mandy's mother passed away 3 years ago, and the boxes contained her mother's things that she simply couldn't part with. There was nothing in the shoe or hat boxes, but I hit the mark when I opened the top box labeled Mom's Things. There were 18 CDs with names and dates written on them, and 14 envelopes similar to the one John's boyfriend had pushed across the table to her the previous evening. I opened one and found it stuffed with $150 and $20 bills. I counted them and found that the envelope contained $6,000. In the next box, I found her shower bag and a collection of Come Get Me, high heels and lingerie that I had never seen her wear. I also found contraceptives, a diaphragm, and a bottle of morning after pills. This was all good for Mandy because I was infertile due to something I had as a child, mumps, chickenpox, diphtheria, or something like that. The third box actually contained her mother's things. I went and got a pen and a piece of paper and wrote down the names that were on the CDs, and then I went and called Glenn and told him everything I had. After finishing my conversation with Glenn, I hung up the phone, went back to Mandy's closet, and counted the money in the envelopes. The largest amount was $12,000 and the smallest was $3,000. The total amount was $74,000. I wrote down a brand of CDs and then took 3 of them, went downstairs and put them in the CD player. It was almost the same thing she did to Billings. She had sex on different days with all 3 men several times before telling them they had to leave before I got home. I took it all back upstairs and laid it all out the way I found it. I'd never laid my hand on a woman in my life, but if Mandy had walked in then, I couldn't have sworn I wouldn't have hurt her. I managed to pull myself together, and by the time I left for work, I had already formed the rough outlines of a plan in my head. For this to work, I would have to control myself and pretend that everything was fine. There was nothing I could do that would make Mandy suspicious of me in the slightest. The problem was that I didn't know if I could do it. She wasn't at the door when I got home that night, but she woke up and reached out to me when I got into bed. I told her I was too tired to have sex, and she told me not to worry, that she would do all the work herself. She slid down and did it all herself. And then she moved closer, snuggled up to me, whispered, "I love you," and fell asleep again. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece it all together. Everything she said to me and did to me was what a loving wife would do. But how could she when she did what she did? It just didn't equate. The next day's audio featured John's boyfriend calling to make sure everything was okay for the evening, and then Mandy calling John to tell him that Billings had just left and that everything had gone well. The video was almost a repeat of what happened last time. Initial work on the couch, transition to the bedroom, sex. She showered, made the bed, and then climbed into bed and started reading a book, and at that moment, I stopped watching. It was my first day off, so I was home when Mandy got home from work. I had dinner ready, and she told me she wanted to take a quick shower before eating. I spent most of the day in a smoky conference room, and I have it in my hair and on my clothes, and I stink. This told me she had probably spent part of the day with Billings or some other guy and needed to get his scent off her before I noticed. This thought made me a little angry, and I headed to the bathroom, throwing off my clothes as I went. When I arrived, she was already in the shower with the water turned on. She stood with her back to me. She obviously didn't hear me move the curtain aside, climb inside, and draw the curtain. The first time she realized I was there was when I grabbed her hips and leaned forward to keep my knees from closing her legs. I had sex with her hard and steady, and then I came out and told her to give me a washcloth. "I'll take care of your back while I'm here." We finished our shower together, and then I told her I was going to wash my hair while I was in the shower. My real reason for letting her come out first was to give her a chance to hide her panties. And of course, when I got out of the shower, they were gone. I also wondered if she had gotten so used to being deceived that she had become careless in her actions. Why didn't she shower and freshen up in her Billings hotel room? If she knew she was going to meet him, why didn't she have a spare pair of clean panties in her purse? Why risk coming home fresh from sex when she knew I'd be home when she got there? Of course, I rarely attacked her when she first came home, but sometimes I did, so why risk it? At dinner, Mandy asked, "What got into you tonight?" "I thought you might like this. You were ready last night and I didn't take care of you." "Yes, you did it. You held me and cuddled with me, and I needed that. And yet you got me, and I didn't reciprocate. You know I like to please you. There shouldn't be any, you have to do this to me because I do this to you. I love you, baby, and I love pleasing you." We made it through my weekend, and I didn't show anything that I liked about her. For her part, she was as attentive and loving as always. One day, when she thought I was dozing on the couch, she came over, leaned over, and kissed me lightly on the forehead, whispering, "I love you," and then walked into the kitchen. I had no doubt that she was serious because she thought I was sleeping, so she wouldn't put on an act, but how could she love me and do what she did? It didn't matter how often I looked at it or from what angle, it still didn't mean anything. Twice I almost spoke out about it, but both times I stopped because it would mean that I would give up my plan to find out about all the men she dated and get even with them. My revenge was paramount, and if Mandy knew that I knew, she would no doubt let John's boyfriend know, and I would lose the element of surprise. I didn't want them to see this happen. The only video on Monday was of Mandy checking the radio before going to bed, but it was audio from a tapped phone. "Hello? It's me. Do you have anything for me?" "Only what happened to him on Thursday evening. I'll pick it up on Monday. Meet me for lunch at Augustino's, and then you can give it to me. Are you ready for Wednesday?" "The way I will always be." "You don't look like you're happy, honey. Should I do this? I certainly hope you show more enthusiasm for your suitors than I'm hearing right now. Have you had any complaints so far?" "No, and I don't want to receive anything. I'm tired. I'm going to bed." And she hung up. I called Glenn and told him that Mandy would be busy on Wednesday, and he gave me a quick rundown of what he had found out about Samuel Billings. 38 years old, married to Carol for 15 years, and father of Ralph and Kathy. He was the chief procurement officer at Apollo Industries, a company that made something rather secretive for the U.S. Department of Defense. Glenn was standing outside my house waiting for John to leave after his meeting with Mandy, and he followed John. He was still digging, but was able to tell me that John's full name was John David Gaynor, and that he was the vice president of sales and marketing for Maxim Corporation, the company that did the design and manufacturing. Glenn was hoping that he would have something else for me in a couple of days. I mentioned that it seemed Gaynor was collecting material that he could use to blackmail or coerce the men Mandy slept with, and that the other names I gave him probably had something to do with buying from or selling to Maxim, and this could perhaps be a starting point in figuring out who they are. On Wednesday and again on Thursday, Mandy entertained a man in our bedroom. She called him Frank, and one of her hidden CDs contained a Frank Stemper recording. It was more like fucking and no, different from what she did with Billings. I looked at the notes every morning, and most of what I took from it was that Gaynor called to make sure everything went well the night before and arranged to meet Mandy for lunch so she could tell him what the receiver recorded. On Friday morning, listening to the phone conversation gave me something that I conveyed to Glenn. This was business as usual until Gaynor said, "Is the meeting scheduled?" "Yes. I will go to meet him as soon as my husband leaves for work." My weekend passed quickly, and on Monday morning, Glenn told me that Mandy left the house 15 minutes after I left for work and drove to the Motel 6 on Ferguson. She knocked on the door of room 118, the door opened, and she walked inside. For a small bribe, he received information that the room was registered to a certain Rhett Baxter. Baxter was also one of the names on Mandy's secret tapes. Mandy stayed in room 118 until 11 o'clock, after which she left and went home. I discovered that I am not the patient person I always thought I was. My original intention was to find out who all 7 men were who had Mandy and then find a way to get revenge, but after 4 weeks I only had Gaynor, Stemper, Billings, and Baxter. I was tired of listening to audio and watching videos of my wife betraying me, and I wanted it to end. I decided it was time to end this. I met with a lawyer and filed the divorce papers. I used my computer to burn copies of Mandy's secret CDs and then waited until my lawyer told me everything was in place. On Thursday, May 5th at 11:10, a man approached Mandy at her work and asked if she was Amanda Haight, and when she said yes, he handed her an envelope and said, "You've been served." When Mandy opened her envelope, she discovered that, in addition to the divorce suit on grounds of adultery, she was also subject to a restraining order keeping her at least 500 feet away from me in the house. The only way she would have been allowed into the house was if she had arranged a court-supervised visit to pick up her belongings. I also included a note saying that she could call and leave a message on the answering machine, letting me know what she would like, put in trash bags, and taken out 150 meters from the house. I also told her not to bother trying to call me on my home phone or cell phone, as I had absolutely no interest in talking to her. Of course it was a lie. I wanted to know what the hell was going on, but I wanted her to sweat a little before we sat down and talked. At the same time Mandy was being served, give or take 5 minutes, Gaynor, Billings, Baxter, and Stemper were handed papers informing them that they were being sued for alienation of affection. Also during this time, special messengers delivered packages to the wives of Gaynor, Billings, Stemper, and Baxter's fiancée. The morning, when all the documents were completed, was stressful for me. I gave Hal and Glenn all the surveillance equipment that Mandy and Gaynor had placed in the house, and they were busy dismantling it. There was a locksmith changing all the locks in the house, and a man from Terminix was scattering ant bait around the perimeter of the house. And of course Mandy ignored my note, and my cell phone started beeping every 4 or 5 minutes. And in between the calls, the house phone rang, and I heard the answering machine go on. "Rob, are you there? Pick up the phone, Rob. Come on, Rob. We need to talk." I ignored both phones, even though Hal and Glenn had removed all the devices that Mandy and Gaynor had installed in the house. I asked them to leave what they had put in. I ignored Mandy's attempts to contact me and waited for what I knew would happen next. I knew Mandy would ignore the restraining order, just as she ignored my note asking her not to bother calling me. Sure enough, when I came home from work on Sunday night and watched the footage, the kitchen camera showed Mandy entering the kitchen through the door leading to the basement. The bedroom camera showed her going into her closet and then coming out with a look on her face that could kill. She was probably upset that her CDs and $74,000 were not there. A camera in the attic showed her sticking her head out of the hatch and seeing that the Hallman XK116 digital voice recorder had disappeared. I went down to the basement and saw that one of the windows was broken, so I called the police and reported a break-in. I gave them copies of my security system and told them that 3 credit cards, $1,000 in cash, and my .38 Smith & Wesson were missing. Specially. It's a lie, of course, but I wanted to make Mandy's life as difficult as possible. I casually commented on the fact that I couldn't understand why she took the revolver, and then I suddenly said, "Oh shit," and one of the detectives said, "What?" "She's not very happy about our divorce. You don't think she—" "No, she wouldn't do that. At least I don't think she would. Do you think maybe I should buy a bulletproof vest?" I told them where she worked, and at 9 in the morning, they arrested her in front of her co-workers. She was charged with breaking and entering, theft, and a separate count of theft of a firearm, and violating a restraining order. Her father posted bail for her, and when I got home from work that evening, there was a message on my answering machine from Mandy. Briefly and to the point. "You bastard." I smiled, removing it. I intended to take what I had and go to the president and CEO of Maxim and ask him if he knew about Gaynor's activities, but then decided not to. I was suing Gaynor, and losing his job would mean losing his income, so I decided to wait until the lawsuit was settled before doing so. Mandy called me 2 or 3 times a day, but I didn't answer any of them. She sent me letters, and I returned them to her unopened. She was sitting on the hood of my car in the hangar parking lot, waiting for me to get out, so I took the service bus to the terminal and took a taxi home from there. Over the next month, I heard everyone on both sides of the family tell me that I was unfair by not talking to Mandy, and I told them all the same thing. She cheated on me with 7 different men, got caught, and we had nothing to talk about. By cheating on me, she lost all right to communicate with me. I would sit down with her and let her talk, but it would be at a time of my choosing, not her. Frankly, I wanted her to suffer. The fact that I also suffered did not mean much to me. The problem was that I loved her. Even knowing what she did, I loved her. The problem was compounded by the fact that I truly believed that she loved me. What I couldn't understand was how she could love me and do what she did. Judging by the hidden discs, she had sexual intimacy with at least 7 different men over the past year and a half. Men with whom she had sex, and then came to my house, still smelling their stench on her. Oh, I know she probably took a shower before coming to me, but their hands were on her and they were in her, and the shower couldn't fix that. I did not move in the same social or business circles as Gaynor, Billings, Baxter, or Stemper, so I had no idea how they dealt with their wives and fiancés, but my lawyer told me that their lawyers had contacted him. Gaynor and Baxter denied everything and said they would go to court and try their luck. Billings and Stemper offered to settle out of court, and I told my lawyer to go ahead and settle the case. I didn't want a protracted legal battle. I just wanted to hurt those bastards. I sent a note to Baxter and told him that, although I had made sure his wife knew what he was doing with mine, I had not yet shared that information with his employer, but that could change at any moment. 2 days later, he offered to settle the matter. Gaynor remained. He was the person who pulled the strings, Mandy's pimp, so to speak, and he was the one I really wanted to hurt. But all I had on him were a few taped conversations and a video of him sitting at our kitchen table, handing Mandy an envelope and receiving a CD from her. To get it, I would need a lot more, and there was only one place where I could get it. The next time Mandy called, I answered the phone. Hello? Rob? This is Mandy. Yes? How are you? It's been better, but not recently. I'd like to talk to you, Rob. About what? About the mess we found ourselves in. What kind of outrage could this be, Amanda? I separated myself from the mess you created in my life. Please, Rob, I love you. I need to explain what happened. It wasn't what you think. Please, Rob. Please let me talk to you. I gave her about 5 seconds of silence and then said, Okay, Amanda, home at 7 in the evening, but I have some questions and I'd better get honest answers. The first time I even think you're not being honest with me, you'll walk out the door and there won't be a next time. You have one chance, and that's it today. You understand? Yes. I won't lie to you, Rob, I promise. Will this be anything like the promise you made to me when we got married? You know, the one where you promised to be faithful to me? I'm sorry, Rob. I probably deserved it, but there will be no lie. See you tonight. Goodbye. She parked in front of the house at 20 minutes to 7. I don't know if she was sitting there trying to work up the courage to face me, or if she felt that since I said 7, she had better follow my instructions to the letter and didn't want to be a minute late. What I do know is that watching her walk up to the house was painful. She was as beautiful as always, and being away from her was killing me. She rang the doorbell at 7 o'clock sharp. I let her in and told her we would use the kitchen. When we got there, I pointed to a chair and said, You sit there, and I'll sit here, where Gaynor was sitting when you gave him the recording, and he gave you the envelope with the money. I saw the look on her face when I said this and explained, You weren't the only one who had hidden cameras in the house. This should tell you that I know a lot more than you think. I have a way of knowing if you try to lie to me discreetly. I told you, Rob, no lies, and I wasn't joking. I placed the recorder on the table in front of me, pressed the record button, and said, Okay, Amanda, you called this meeting. She looked at me and was silent for a moment, and then said, I need you to know one thing, Rob. I need you to know that I love you. I love you with all my heart and soul, and I would give anything if I could just go back in time and change some things. I really love you, Rob, and everything that happened wasn't because of anything you did or didn't do wrong. I didn't do what I did because I fell out of love with you. I did this because I love you so much that I can't bear the thought of losing you. I just sat there and listened, silently looking at her. What I did, Rob, I did because I was forced to do it by blackmail. She saw that I was getting ready to open my mouth, raised her hand and said, "Please, let me figure this out, Rob. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, so please let me tell you everything before you say anything. When I'm done, I'll answer any questions you have, but please let me tell you everything first." She looked at me for a second, and then asked, "Can I have a glass of wine? This will help me calm my nerves." I opened a bottle of white wine and placed it and the glass in front of her, and then sat down and waited. She poured some wine into her glass, took a sip, and then told me the story. This happened during my work shift almost 2 years ago. The company she worked for was hosting a cocktail party for their clients, and since I was working, Mandy's boss asked her if she would be willing to serve as hostess. Since I wasn't home until midnight, Mandy said she would do it herself. In addition to one of the large rooms at the Hyatt Regency, her company also prepared a hotel room. The first couple of hours passed without incident, and then Mandy began to feel strange. She felt a little disoriented and woozy, and her boss told her to go up to the hotel room and lie down. She didn't remember the next part, but she knew it happened because they showed her the video. Phil, her boss, came up to check on her, and when he leaned over to ask if she was okay, she grabbed him by the tie and threw him onto the bed. She rolled on top of him and kissed him, and then unzipped his fly and lay on top of him. I knew Phil and I liked him. I knew him well enough to know that he would never hit on Mandy. But I also knew that he wouldn't fight her off if she was the aggressor. Before Phil could walk out the door, Baxter came in, and after Baxter, 3 men she didn't know appeared. By the time Baxter made out to her for the second time, she was beginning to realize what was happening, but she couldn't stop it. And by the time the other 3 came back for a few seconds, she was already a passionate participant. It was the night Phil called you and told you that the company put me in a room because they thought I drank too much. Baxter and the 3 men took turns watching her until about 2 a.m. and then left. The next morning, Amanda woke up with a headache. She cleaned herself up and got to work. She hadn't seen the video yet, so she didn't know about Phil and wondered why he had been avoiding her all day. She did know that she had been fucked by 4 men she didn't know, and when she came home from work that evening, she was determined to tell me what had happened. But as soon as she saw me, she lost her nerve. She went to work the next morning, determined to be brave enough to face me when she got home that evening. But at 11:30, Phil called her into his office, and John Gaynor was there. She knew that Gaynor did a lot of business with the company, but she didn't realize how important he was until Phil said, "John needs to talk to you about something. Why don't you have a longer lunch?" She couldn't understand what Gaynor wanted to talk to her about, but everything became clear when they got to the restaurant. He slid 6 photographs across the table toward her and casually asked what I would think if I received copies, or maybe even a copy of the video. I couldn't let you see those photos, and if there was a video, it could only be 10 times worse than the photos. Even though I thought I liked it, I knew I didn't do it on purpose. She later learned that Baxter had told Gaynor that he would like to have sex with Mandy, and Gaynor asked what it would cost to be able to do so. Baxter said that for something as sweet as Mandy, he would give his entire business to Maxim, not just part of it. Gaynor said, "Agreed." Gaynor slipped Mandy a date rape cocktail. Apparently he did this often and always had some in his car, briefcase, or pocket. When Phil told Mandy to go up to the hotel room, Gaynor said he was going up to his room and offered to walk Mandy up to her room and make sure she got there safely. He laid Mandy on the bed and then hurried upstairs to the room he had already rented. He planned to set up a buyer from another company with an available girl and record it on tape. He hurried to the room, took the camera, and took it back to the hotel room. He hid the camera, turned it on, and followed Baxter. By the time he returned to the room, Mandy and Phil were already there. The deal was simple. Gaynor needed a favor, and if Mandy agreed to do it, he would give her the photos and videos. The favor consisted of him spending the day with one of his clients. She had to, simply had to, have these photos and the accompanying video, and given what she'd already been through, what was one more thing? One more and she would have gone under the hammer. She would still tell me what happened, but she would tone it down a little, perhaps limiting it to telling me about Baxter. But the most important thing was that I would never see the photos and videos. She agreed to provide a one-time service. She spent the afternoon in a hotel room with his client, and Gaynor gave her photographs and video footage of the cocktail party. She destroyed them, and then started working up the courage to face me and tell me about the cocktail party and what happened. I was working overtime that night, so her confession would have to wait until the next day. The next day, Gaynor called her and said he needed another favor. He had another client to take care of. She laughed at him and told him not to forget about it. Now that she had the photos and videos, he had no power over her. Gaynor then told her that yes, she did have the originals, but he had copies, and he also had a recording he had made of her while she was courting his client the previous afternoon. Since then, she has become Gaynor's little girl. To prevent any attempt she might later make against him by going to the authorities due to him blackmailing her, he began paying her commissions on sales, which happened after she took care of one of his friends, and he did it in his rented apartment, so he filmed her taking the money and putting it in her purse. The furnishings in our home served a dual purpose. Firstly, to record her meetings at home, and secondly, Gaynor wanted to keep an eye on me to see if I became suspicious and started checking Mandy. He had a good relationship with her, especially with guys like Baxter and Billings who kept coming back for more, and he didn't want to lose them, so he kept an eye on me to adapt if I started to get suspicious. Mandy finally woke up to the fact that if he could use the tapes against her, then she could use them against him, and she began making 2 copies of everything she captured from the receiver. She kept one set for herself, and when the time came, she was going to tell Gaynor no more. And when he threatened to show her the tapes, she told him that if he did, she would snitch on him to every guy she was with. He forced her to have sex. And when was this supposed to happen? As soon as I have $100,000. I was going to tell you what I did, and I wanted to have enough money to come back if you threw me out. What if I throw you out? Did you think that maybe I wouldn't do this? I hoped that you could love me as much as I love you, and you would understand why I did what I did. I didn't want to lose you, Rob, and I still couldn't understand that I wouldn't have done it if you'd ever seen that videotape. I had no choice, Rob. I didn't dare risk you staying with me after watching the video. I wasn't sure what the outcome would be if I just came out at a cocktail party, but without the video, I thought maybe I just had a chance. I wouldn't have any chance at all if you saw me with Baxter and those others. How many times did you have to persuade Phil to let you play in hotels all this time? The only time I did anything with Phil was the night of the party. He gave me paid time off anytime Gaynor said he needed me. He didn't really want to, but Gaynor showed him pictures of Phil and I doing it and suggested that it would be a shame if Phil's wife got the video. I guess Phil will fire you now that I've warned everyone. No. Phil and I talked about something and we were both holding our breath to see what Gaynor could do. He can't hurt me anymore, and he has no reason to hurt Phil. But who can say for sure? Phil knows I wasn't myself that night, so we were able to get back on good terms. And that's all? Anything else before you go? She hesitated for a few seconds and then spoke. I was hoping that I could convince you to give me the money you took from my closet. Now that you kicked me out, I could take advantage of it. Sorry, but you'll just have to consider this the price you paid for stabbing me in the back. I might consider giving you some of the money if you agree to testify against him if I end up suing him. Of course I will do it, and I'll do it for free. I'll let you know. And I stood up, making it clear that, as far as I understood, her visit was over. She looked up at me. Is there really no chance, Rob? Is there really no chance that we can get through this and stay together? I love you, Rob. God knows what I love. I can't understand how Amanda is. There might have been a chance if you had told me about the cocktail party right after it happened, but now, after all these months and all these men, I don't understand how to do this. She had tears in her eyes as I walked her to the door, and there were tears in mine as I watched her drive away. The next day, I went to the Maxim office complex in the city and headed to Gaynor's office. I walked right past his secretary, who jumped up and told me I couldn't come in. I smiled at her and said, "It's okay, honey. He's waiting for me." When I entered, he was sitting at his desk reading some papers. He looked up, and I saw recognition flash across his face. "Mr. Gaynor, I believe," I said. "I am Mandy's husband, but I believe you already know that." He started to get up, and I said, "You don't need to get up. I won't be here that long." I threw the envelope on his desk and said, "You weren't the only one who had hidden cameras in my house. In this envelope, you will find 4 things. One of them is a copy of the videotape of you giving my future ex-wife an envelope containing money in exchange for recording her evening with Billings. The second item is a copy of the recording of that evening with Billings. This is just to let you know that Amanda herself made a copy of everything you made her do in our house, so that your hidden cameras could record it. Point number 3 is an excerpt from the recording that Amanda made for me last night, and these excerpts will let you know that she has agreed to testify against you if the case goes to trial, which is exactly how it will end if you don't use point 4, which is my lawyer's card. It has a phone number on it. I would strongly advise you to call him and let him know that you are going to settle the lawsuit that I am filing against you. If you don't make that call, I'll lay everything I have on the DA's desk next Friday." I turned to leave the office, and when I got to the door, I turned to him and said, "Hey, you're having a great day today," and then walked away. The next day, my lawyer called me and said that Gaynor had called him and agreed to settle the case out of court. I waited until all the receipts had cleared and the dust had settled, and then I made 6 copies of everything I had and sent 1 set to the president and CEO of Maxim and 1 copy to each of the 5-person board of directors. 3 days later, I received a call from a very angry man, John Gaynor. "You fucking bastard! You said that if I agree, you won't do anything." No, that's not what I said. I said that if you agree, I will not take this to the DA so he can file criminal charges against you. I didn't say anything about not telling your boss. And just so you know, it's all about revenge. I hung up, and Mandy asked, "Who was it?" "Your ex-pimp. He's upset because somehow his boss found out what he was doing, and it upset him so much that he fired Gaynor." "Yes, Mandy is back in the house. She didn't return my favor, but she returned to the house. She'll sleep in the guest bedroom until we see if we can get everything back to normal. I'm not at all sure that we can do this. I really love her, and I really believe that she loves me, so I'm willing to try, but I don't know if that love will be enough. There are problems that need to be solved, and trust is one of them. One of the others is that Mandy was right when she said she thought we might have a chance if I never saw the video of her at that cocktail party. I never saw that video, but I watched all the other videos she hid in her closet, and the images of Mandy with other men were imprinted in my brain. And every time I look at Mandy, they start playing in my head. I told her I would try, and I will. I will try my best, but I don't make any promises. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.